Who do you want to see elected president? Let me rephrase that. Which fictional president from TV and film would you vote for? Because obviously none of the real ones running are worth consideration. So we'll have a little fun with this today. We've got to. I mean, my God, it's just been so... everybody's going to be so glad this is over when this day is behind us. You know what I mean? Jim Walsh here. Number, by the way, is 663-1270. My name is Jim Walsh. You're listening to Super Talk 1270. You can hear it online at supertalk1270.com. It's so easy this year, even more so than other years, to get totally cynical about this election. And I'm a cynical guy to begin with. You know what I mean? I'm actually wearing a sticker that says, I don't give a rat's patoot if you vote or not. All right? And by the way, that's true. I don't care. You know? This is the one program, this is probably the one place in the universe where you can actually tune in and you're not going to hear some stupid, lame lecture about why you got to go and get out and vote because it's important, it's your civic duty, and it really makes a difference. Yeah, thank you. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to sit here and insult your intelligence. If you decide to vote, if you vote today, all I can say is I sincerely hope it works out for you. And if it doesn't, and chances are it won't, I remember the words of a very wise man. It might have been H.L. Mencken, or Will Rogers maybe, who said, remember, if your candidate loses, remember, elections don't really change anything. If they did, they'd have to make them illegal. It's funny because it's true. All right. So we'll have a little fun here. We'll lighten up a little bit and talk about which fictional president would be the best. Because, I mean, let's face it, in real life, all the best presidents are the fictional presidents. Well, Lincoln maybe, but, you know, unless you know a way to dig up Lincoln. And, of course, you can go down the whole list here. We got him, because I'm an older guy, because I'm an old geezer, because I'm a fart. I tend to go back to guys like Henry Fonda from the movie Failsafe. Mr. Chairman is the President of the United States. You know, Henry, he had that sort of very unique diction, or lack thereof. You know, like somebody snuck up behind him and stole his consonants. He left him with a vowel and a diphthong. Yeah, I'm still dead. But the thing I always remember about Henry Fonda, the movie Failsafe, you remember it was Dr. Strangelove without the comedy, without the laughs. They took the same storyline, but they kind of played it as a serious thriller, if you will, where the bombers are on their way to Russia, and they got to stop them because if they drop the bombs, they're going to be into the world and all this business. And in that movie, it was actually a pretty good movie. It had the thankless position of being compared to Dr. Strangelove, which came out right about the same time. Of course, Strangelove is such a classic. Any movie that's similar is going to come off lame by comparison. But it was in its own right a pretty good movie. Sidney Lumet, great director, he directed it. And it had people like, Henry Fonda, who is Henry Fonda, probably the guy everybody wishes were president of the United States. He just had that look. I mean, even the back of his neck, you know, there's a close-up on the back of his neck at one point before he turns around and you see it's him. And even the back of his neck looked presidential. And he turns around with that great Nebraska twang. Hello, Buck, how's your Russian today? We're gonna need it. We gotta call a premier of the Soviet Union. The one thing about that movie that always amused me, there's a scene in the movie where they're on the hotline to Russia. It's Henry Fonda as the president and a very young actor named Larry Hagman. Yes, that Larry Hagman. I Dream of Jeannie and J.R. in Dallas, same guy. He was very young at the time, and he played the role of, he was the Russian translator. He was sitting there translating everything that the Russian premier said, so you could kind of understand what was going on there between the two of them over the phone as they were, negotiating with this whole nuclear strike thing. And there's this one scene right at the beginning of that segment where Henry Fonda, as the president, sits down with Buck, the translator's name, Larry Hagman, and says, "Now, Buck, it's very important that the premier and I understand each other. I mean, there are words in certain languages that don't carry the same weight in other languages. There are idioms. There are things you could say that might accidentally offend the other person. It's very important that the premier and I understand each other fully. We can't afford not to. Do you understand that, Buck?" And Buck says, "Well, yes, sir, I understand. I'll do my best." "Well, that's all we can do." And then he gets on the phone, the president does, and he goes, "Mr. Chairman is the President of the United States. Except he'll be the telephone melting from a nuclear fireball." Beep! And there you go, the end of the movie. No, not the end of the movie. But. So I think my all-time favorite movie president would be Henry Fonda from the movie Failsafe. But what about yours? Let's have a little fun with this. Who do you wish could be president in real life instead of the goobers we obviously are going to have to choose from today? I'd love to hear from you on this. Number 663-1270. Area code 701-663-1270. Jim Walsh on Super Talk 1270. More conversation, your calls coming up.
We celebrate our Independence Day.
That, of course, Bill Pullman from Independence Day. And the question is, which fictional president from TV or film would you vote for today if you had a chance? I've already told you mine. In case you're just tuning in, my choice would be Henry Fonda as the unnamed president in the movie Failsafe. The guy who negotiated. Well, I'm not going to spoil the movie. You got to go rent the movie. It's great. And the best thing about it is Henry Fonda as the president. This is definitely the guy. Like I say, even the back of his neck looks presidential. So who would get your vote? Number here is 663-1270, 663-1270. I mean, we got to take a break from all this crap, this ugliness. Today is election day. And if you're voting today, well, good luck with it. That's all I can say. I'm not going to sit here and insult your intelligence by giving you a big lecture on why it's important you got to vote today. That's entirely up to you. I'll be honest with you. As far as I'm concerned, it's none of my damn business whether you vote or not. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to sit here and be some lame-o and give you some stupid lecture about civic responsibility, because that's just stupid. One of the great things about this country is that you don't have to participate if you don't want to. I truly believe that. I truly believe that. That's the genius of this system, is that, people say it's a terrible thing that more people don't vote. I say it's a testament to the genius of this system, that we have the kind of system where, every election is not about life or death. You see, you look at those countries, where they have a very high voter turnout, like 90-some%. And I'm not even talking about, there are countries where voting is required by law, which is stupid. But the countries where it may not be required by law, but the voting is really super high. You look at the countries that we're talking about, basically they're banana republics. They're tin pot dictatorships. They're places where the person you vote for can literally mean life or death to you and your family. Thankfully, we do not live in that kind of society. The worst we get is a schlemiel like Donald Trump and Hillary, whatever you want to call her. Now, you can argue that one or the other may be the lesser of evils, and that's fine. I don't really care. But the point is, either way, hey, look, we survived Nixon. Okay, need I say more? Need I say more? We got through 6 years of Nixon, and we survived. That's how good the system is. I for one, I do have faith in the system that it's designed, the stopgaps against tyranny, as the Founding Fathers might have said, the whole checks and balances thing. When you consider what the president realistically can actually do, that does kind of put a different light on things. And then, of course, you have I've always had kind of and again, what we're talking about here, well, let me give you the main issue at hand here. It's Super Talk 1270, supertalk1270.com. Which fictional president from TV and or film would you vote for? That's the question. We're trying to put a little bit of a light spin on this rather dreary election scenario that we're dealing with here. And the number is 663-1270. Who's your all-time favorite president in the movies or TV? I'm sure somebody's going to call and mention, what's his name, Martin Sheen from, what's the show? The West Wing, which, politics aside, was a pretty neat show. It had a very unique spin on things because that guy Sorkin, he's a hell of a writer. And again, forget about where you stand on because I know people who are arch conservatives who like the show too. It's a very cleverly written show. And I can see where, although Martin Sheen as president, if you ever saw the movie, what's the movie? And the name of it escapes me. The one with Christopher Walken where he had the kind of, he could predict the future by touching you. He'd shake your hand and he could see what you were going to do in the future. And Martin Sheen was in that movie. He was a politician running for president, but he was the bad guy. You know the movie I'm talking about? And at one point, Christopher Walken shakes Martin Sheen's hand, and he sees Martin Sheen in the future as the president starting World War III. That's one that never made it into the West Wing, obviously. What's the name of that damn movie? It'll come to me in a minute here. Anyway, Christopher Walken, he was a guy, he could predict the future, and then he had to try to stop Martin Sheen from running for office and becoming the president. It's a really good movie. Yeah, Stephen King, based on a book by Stephen King. Anyway. But that would be a great choice too. Martin Sheen as president in that movie, not the West Wing, but in that one where he has to fulfill his destiny. The missiles are flying, hallelujah! Woo, yeah. Oh, what the hell is the name of that? I'll have to look it up. Anyway. You get old and the memory's the second thing to go, right? Your favorite fictional president from TV or film, 663-1270. Somebody's mentioning David Palmer, our first true black African-American president, the guy in the first season of 24. Remember him? And he later became a spokesman for an insurance company. Frank Underwood from House of Cards. Here's another good one. President Beck, not Glenn Beck. No, President, remember Morgan Freeman as the president in Deep Impact? The movie about the meteor? Well, there was two of those stupid meteor movies, but I'm talking about the one with Morgan Freeman where he was the president and they were trying to stop the meteor and the big tidal wave washed New York away and all that kind of cool stuff. Anyway, let's see here. Laura Roslin from Battlestar Galactica. And that's one you kind of have to be a sci-fi person to really know that one. Jed Bartlett. Yeah, that's the name of the guy from The West Wing. Harrison Ford's character, the president from Air Force One. Anybody remember a movie called Dave with Kevin Kline, where he was the splitting image of the president, and the president died or something, so they had to fill his place with another guy who looked like the president, and they picked him, and he became the president. But he wasn't the president; he just looked like him. I just say. So we got a whole bunch on the list here, and again, my vote at this point would go for Henry Fonda as president. They never actually name him in the movie; he's just called the president. in the movie Failsafe. Great movie if you've never seen it. Basically, the storyline is it's Dr. Strangelove without the laughs. It's played more like a straight thriller. And it was a movie that was being made at the same time as Strangelove. And there was actually some legal issues involved, which I'm told they settled out of court. But great performance by Henry Fonda as a man trying to make the world safe for consonants, or the lack thereof. And again, we're doing this because, frankly, everybody is sick to death. You know, I'm not going to be happy until I look up the name of that movie with Christopher Walken. I'm sitting here, and in the back of my mind's going, come on, what's the name of that movie? What's the name of that movie? Christopher Walken, he was the guy who predicted the future, and he met Martin Sheen, who was running for, I think, the Senate, and he shook his hand, and he saw him as the president in the future, and he was starting the end of the world. He launched the missiles, the end of the world, and all that business. And I'm going to have to look it up during the break. Because otherwise I'm going to be sitting here, you know, as ADHD as I am, I'm going to be sitting here going nuts in the next half hour if I don't think of it. So, which fictional president from TV or film would you vote for? Number here, 663-1270, 663-1270. Jim Walsh, that would be me, at Supertalk 1270. And supertalk1270.com. Hang in there. Be back.
We put it there, Mr. Chairman, and we're not helpless. What we put between us, we can remove.
Now, you see, now that's the kind of guy you want running the country during a crisis, right there. And that's Henry Fonda from Failsafe, and he gets my vote for the imaginary president that I would like to see elected. I'm telling you, this guy in the movie, it's amazing, his presence in the movie. He looks presidential, even the back of his head. When you first see him in the movie, you see the back of his head, and then he kind of whips around, you see his face. But even the back of his head looks like, yeah, I'd vote for the back of that guy's head. Yeah, absolutely. All right, the number here, we're talking about fictional presidents who you would rather see elected than, well, you know. 663-1270, 663-1270. Jim Walsh here on Super Talk 1270. I mean, there's a couple of other stories of interest I found. The thing about Kevin Kramer here, he's talking about media bias. Apparently, he doesn't like the way the national media handles political stories. I guess what I'm thinking, he would prefer they handle it the way we handle it in North Dakota. Which is basically all the media is bought and paid for by the Republican Party, and everything consists of apologetics for the Republicans, press releases, and lobbing softballs at the politicians. I'm guessing that's what Mr. Kramer would prefer on the national level. Of course, they already have that. They have Fox, right? No, I don't know. So anyway, let's move on. And again, if you're just tuning in, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you got to go vote, because if you don't vote, you can't complain. Sure, you can complain. That's a beauty of our system. You got freedom of speech. You don't have to vote, and you can complain. See, I think it's just the opposite. If you vote, regardless of who you're voting for, I don't care if you're voting for, you can vote for Gary Johnson, whoever. You want to write in Barney the dinosaur for all I care. But the fact is, if you vote, if you go and you pull that lever or you check the thing on the dangling Chad, the fact is, whether your candidate wins or not, you are casting a vote of confidence for the system. See, that's why you can't win with these get out the vote people, because if you go and you vote and your guy loses, they say, well, you know, you voted. I mean, you can't complain because you took part in the system. And if the guy wins and he screws up, as they inevitably do, well, you voted for the guy and he won, you know. And if you don't vote, they say, well, you didn't vote. You can't win with these people. But I say you can win just by bypassing the whole process. You know, just don't worry about it. Just get on with your life, you know. Don't worry about who's going to be. You know, there are more important things in your life on a day-to-day basis than who gets elected to any given office. There's a famous, should have been a bumper sticker, it wasn't, but there was a famous meme, if you will, from the early part of the last century, it went, don't vote, it just encourages them. See, I like that. I like that a lot. Which fictional president would you prefer? All right, number 663-1270. Who have we not talked about here? And as always, somebody mentioned Peter Sellers' Peter Sellers' presidential portrayal in Dr. Strangelove. I don't know how good a president he would make, though, because from what I recall of that movie, he basically was just kind of going through the motions, you know. And the world was getting ready to end, and he was just kind of a little more concerned about the proper protocol for the procedure or whatever. Frank Underwood from House of Cards. Well, you know, here's another one, a great one. And you'd have to be a total nerd to get this. But fortunately, I am. So I'm aware of this. A few years ago in the comic books, Lex Luthor ran for president and got elected. Lex Luthor, of course, of Superman fame. He was the arch nemesis of the Man of Steel. Still is, I suppose. And in the comic books, back in the early part of last decade, Lex Luthor ran for president, and he got elected. And Superman was not very happy about that, but Lex did get elected, and eventually his ego was his downfall, yada, yada. You know how these things always kind of play out in the world of comic books. But yeah, for a while there, Lex Luthor was the most powerful man in the world. He had his bald-headed finger on the button. And Clark and the gang were not too pleased about that, but that I always thought, you know, Lex Luthor, you know he's not going to take any crap from anybody, right? And you know he's a pretty smart guy. I mean, he built all those wild robots and wacky stuff, kryptonite robots and whatever to try to destroy Superman. So, you know, he knows about weapons, right? Yeah, he knows how to get things done. He gets all them he had this wacky laboratory with all kinds of weird stuff going on, but you know how he knows how to put things together. So, yeah, why not Lex Luthor? We're overdue to have a bald guy in the White House anyway. I kind of sympathize with that, being a little bit on the follically challenged side myself. We haven't had a bald president since, Ford, I think. The last one was Ford, and then I think Eisenhower was balding before him. And before that, you'd have to go back, who would have been the last guy? Was Taft? Taft had a full head of hair. Woodrow Wilson, I think like Martin Van Buren. We have not had that many bald presidents. I just find it interesting. So maybe it's time to put a bald guy back in the White House, you know, because that's not a bald spot. It's a solar battery for a lean, clean political machine. There you go. Or a love machine. All right. So, we're going to move on in a couple of seconds here. But what we've been doing today, in case you're just tuning in, we've been talking about our favorite fictional presidents. Okay, here's one. Fitzgerald Grant from Scandal. I'm not even familiar with that one. You know, some of these I've never heard of. I'm not much of a TV guy. You know, I have a handful of shows I like. I like some of the science fiction shows. And House of Cards, I'm familiar with that, of course, from the Frank Underwood, Kevin there, and he's a pretty brilliant guy. And Michael Douglas's character in The American President. What's her name in Veep? Elaine from Seinfeld. Basically, it's a vice president. I just like. I haven't seen the show, but I love the concept. Who would be the president? George Costanza. Hello, I'm George Costanza. I'm unemployed. I live with my parents, and I want to be your president. There you go. That would work. That would work, definitely. Because you know the man says what he means and means what he says. Fictional presidents. Somebody mentioned the Manchurian Candidate. There really was no president portrayed in the Manchurian Candidate, though. There was a guy who wanted to become president. He was set to become vice president, and he was going to try to become the president. The guy who played that one cop that nobody liked on Barney Miller. You know the guy I'm talking about? Well, you see the movie, you'll understand. It's a great movie. You've never seen it. Came out in the early 60s. A lot of people tied it in with what happened to Kennedy, assassination, political manipulation. But it's a great movie. So check. And Frank Sinatra in a karate fight. That should be all I need to say. You ever want to see Frank Sinatra and Henry Silva in a karate fight? That's the movie you want to rent. Great movie, The Manchurian Candidate. But you don't actually see anybody being the president in that movie. But it is a great political movie. All right, number here is 663-1270. We're going to take care of some unfinished business in just a few minutes here. My name is Jim Walsh. Love to hear from you here at Super Talk 1270, supertalk1270.com. Be right back.
The Red River Farm Network. Ag News is here on Super Talk 1270.
And, of course, Keyboard Cat, who should be elected president. Who would run? Who would be his running mate? Maybe Grumpy Cat or Little Bub. I love Little Bub. Little Bub's a little kitty cat with her tongue stuck out. She's got a bunch of videos on YouTube. Anyway, there's another candidate for president who I would vastly prefer to the people, any of the people who are actually running. All right, Jim Walsh here on Super Talk 1270. Which fictional president would you like to vote for? Would you, given the opportunity to vote for, would you? 663-1270. We're kind of winding down here in Brandon, Manitoba. Here's a story that has nothing to do with the elections, okay? In fact, it happened in Canada. Or I don't think are they having an election? I don't think they are. Anyway, well, they had their big elections last year with Trudeau, right? Brandon, Manitoba, a town that's not too far from here, is it? 4 or 5 hours up the road. You get over the border there. You know, the Mounties come out and meet you and greet you, and then you get over the border, and I think it's like another hour and a half, 2 hours up the road, Brandon, Manitoba. Well, they had a panic in Brandon after Halloween when a girl found a syringe in her Hollywood candy, and you know what they found out? You know, you're thinking, oh, this is terrible. You know, it sounds like an urban legend. Oh, the terrible thing is somebody put a syringe in that girl's candy. Well, it turned out that the responsible party, true story, was a cat. Really. Apparently what happened was the cat knocked over some insulin syringes. You know how cats are with knocking things over, right? Well, the cat knocked over some insulin syringes. One of them fell into the candy bowl from which the treats were distributed. It was all wrapped up. It couldn't poke anybody. But somebody, they had a bunch of fun-sized Snickers and Three Musketeers in there, and somebody just probably grabbed a handful, threw it in the kid's bag, and that's how it wound up there. But you have to wonder if it was deliberate because, cat. All right. Another note from an acquaintance of mine who likes to follow the political scene. If your state is a foregone conclusion in the election, and ours certainly is, but if your state is a foregone conclusion, how do you get yourself geared up to vote? Now, here in North Dakota, we are overwhelmingly red. One thing a lot of people do is focus on the ballot measures. And my general philosophy on ballot measures is when in doubt, vote no on everything. That just seems to be, you see, I get nervous at the idea of having a referendum for things. It's one of the reasons I have kind of a love-hate relationship with elections in general. There are certain things in our society that should not be decided by majority rule. Should medical marijuana be available? Well, in my opinion, it should, but it should not be decided by the majority. It just simply should be available. I don't go for this idea that more democracy is necessarily better. And our conservative friends like to say, we don't live in a democracy, we live in a representative republic, a constitutional representative. And they're right about that, of course. Of course, democracy is great when it serves their purpose. But they're right about that. You know, we're not supposed to be in a society where majority rule decides everything. There is such a thing as tyranny of the majority. Or like the old joke, majority rule is when two wolves and a chicken vote on what to have for dinner, right? That's great if you're the wolf. But that's why our system is so incredibly complicated. They put so many. If you've never read the Constitution, you really should, just to get a feel for the way things are supposed to be run as opposed to the way they are run a lot of times. But the whole point was what they call these checks and balances, which is basically another word for compromising of power. The president, and this is one thing that always amuses me, every time we get into a presidential election and people talk about what the president can do, what the president should do, well, the laws, the powers of the president, at least where the Constitution comes in, there are very specific, drawn-out limits on what the president can do. The president cannot declare war. Congress is supposed to be the power to declare war. But the president, of course, does have the power of the military. The president is commander-in-chief. But the original idea was the president would be the commander of the military, but he would follow the policy as dictated by Congress. That was the original idea, anyway. We all see how well that has worked out. I think it all goes back to the bomb. When the president got in charge of the bomb, that kind of changed the whole ball game. You know, back when they got the bomb and Truman used the bomb and Eisenhower threatened to use the bomb and Kennedy got into the Cuban thing, and all of a sudden the president got all this power and they said, well, we can only let one person do this. So we're going to say only the president can use the bomb. Oh, that's an awful lot of power to give to one guy. I don't get me wrong. I don't know what the answer is to that issue. But that, to me, Gary Wills wrote a great book on the subject. And again, I don't remember the name. But hey, you just Google Gary Wills and look for the book he wrote about how the president got too powerful. And it dates back, in his opinion, to when the president got control of nuclear weapons, the bomb. I think he makes some valid points in that book. Anyway. So if your state's a foregone conclusion, as it is here, we all know damn well who's going to get the 3 electoral votes for North Dakota. We just know. So what do? Well, you kind of look at the lower offices, and of course Republicans, they vote for a can of baked beans. And I think it was Joel Heitkamp said that. They'd vote for a can of baked beans in this state if it had an R on it, right? It's ridiculous. Regardless of what they said or stood for. That's why I always thought, if you want to really change things, we need a lot of people in the state to start just voting for Democrats. Not that I'm a Democrat, not that I even like the Democratic agenda, but if you're going to have a two-party system, then you should have a two-party system. And the only way you're going to have a two-party system is if you start electing some people from the other party. Okay. Maybe it's time for me to switch to decaf. I know. But, and the ballot measures. A couple of these are up in the air, but if you're in a district where the down ballot stuff is also a foregone conclusion, are you the kind of person who votes just because you're supposed to? And are you sitting there, are you the kind of person who is sitting there, you haven't gone to vote yet, but you definitely plan on voting, but you still have no idea who you're going to vote for? I mean, this late in the game. You're a few hours or even a few minutes away from going to the polls, and you still have no idea. It's going to be basically eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and shemp. It's going to be your choices. Do me a favor. If you're one of those people, do us all a favor. Stay the hell home today. We don't need more idiots voting. Thank you. One more story here, and I promise this has absolutely nothing to do with politics. I don't think. There's a story about a bar in the Twin Cities that held a smack fest. That's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing where women, it's always women in these things, they slap each other in a contest for a cash prize. And everything worked out okay until the winner walked out of the bar and was allegedly assaulted by her opponent, the opponent's boyfriend, and a bunch of their friends. So you win a slapping contest, and the losing slapper gets all her family and friends together, and they slap one on you big time. Seriously, who came up with this? Well, let's get a bunch of women in the bar and get them all drunk, and then they can slap each other for money. Yeah, gee, what could possibly go wrong with that, right? Oh, and the cash prize? $175. Yeah, I know, hardly worth it. I mean, $1,000. You could slap me for $1,000. I know a lot of people who do it for a lot less, but I'm just saying, $175 to be slapped around is it's kind of a sexist thing when you think about it. You know, the idea, we're going to slap around some women and get some money. Ew. It's kind of creepy when you think about it. Anyway, that's what's happening in our world today. Remember, as they say in Chicago, vote early, vote often. Or don't vote at all because it just encourages them, right? Thank you. I'm out of here. Brad Meyer is next. Have a good one. Super Talk 1270.